Call the meeting to order. All rise with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do a roll call.
Wondergem.
Here.
Vanek. Here. Steffes.
Here.
Gardine here. Campbell.
Here.
Dehan.
Here.
Highboard.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Please note, as a courtesy to the members of the audience, the Board of Education, please silence your cell phone. Public will only be able to speak during public comment if signed up. Do we have anything, Mr. Brown? Thank you very much. All right, first item, the approval agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Second item on the agenda is honoring a Barb Palmer.
Yes. So, hi Barb.
Come on up.
So yes, I think I'll start off. I have a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff to give you. We'll start with this.
Oh, my word, my favorite thing.
Maybe we'll give this a raise.
Sure, yes. Today. Congratulations, Ray, you got through
Yeah,
it.
there you go. There you go. Well, we just want to take time. We didn't get a chance before. We wanted to honor Barb. Gosh, about 20 years.
Yeah, I'm saying 20.
Yeah, about 20 years on this Board of Education. A lot has happened during that time, and she can be proud of the legacy that you've left here in Grandville, because you played a huge role in that. I'll always remember you were the first voice that called me and told me that I had the honor of being the superintendent here. And I remember you said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, I do a cartwheel right now, but I don't think I can, because my wife was in front of me and my son was to the right of me, just waiting to hear what was going on." But Barb, you have been such an instrumental part of this district in so many ways, and I hope you know how much you've just touched everything. And I consider you. You were a great leader, a great board president, a great board member, and I think above all, a great friend.
Yeah.
And please keep in touch.
Yeah.
We're going to miss you, but you have left a great legacy here. So
Cool.
we have the flowers, and those aren't for Ray. Don't forget that.
Oh, my.
A few other things for you.
I do have a few
You want me to bring it up,
words
or
I'd
you
like
got
to
it all?
say, too.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I get my
Your
picture.
picture, a certificate,
Aw.
another
Oh, my
card with some nice
It's
things.
just quite a resemblance. She had my eyelashes. And
Oh, yeah.
And then this was from Board Appreciation. Somebody left that for you too. So
Oh,
just
wow.
we'll give this to
Okay,
somebody.
yeah,
I don't know.
they're
Maybe
kind of
thank
focused
you.
on-
Appreciate it.
Wait so much. But I'm glad to be able to come back and
Yeah.
say thank you, because I kind of left in a quick way. Like, I was here one day, gone the next. So I did have a few words I'd like to
Yes.
say.
First, I need a hug.
Oh,
now.
yes. Thank you. God,
Appreciate
for
it.
everything.
Like I say, this is really a different perspective, and I give a lot of credit for people come up here and give us public comment. So for those who do it, I really, it's kind of intimidating. So it is really great to be in front of you again. And it was just a very heartfelt time for me to say goodbye. And I wanted to do more at the time, but I just couldn't do it without breaking down. So I thank Roger and Jason for your support and understanding of kind of what was going on for me, and that you have me back tonight. So I'll try to stay within my 5 minutes. But first of all, I'm just really proud of being able to serve the Grandville Public Schools family and representing the Grandville community at large. Being a part of such an involved and supportive community like Grandville, I couldn't have dreamed of anything happening to me like that. I came from Mount Pleasant and married someone in Grandville, and here I was so lucky to get connected to the schools. And I have to thank so many people for putting their vote of confidence in me to represent the schools. And I hope I've done the job that you wanted me to do. From the get-go, my mind was set first on what's good for the kids and all of our students. What do they need to be successful? And that's why I love MTSS, by the way. If you learn about it, it looks at every kid and what we can do to help them be successful in school. Because I've known kids who haven't been, and this is something that I think we've really made real great progress on. So I thank you for keeping that going. I do have a few highlights from my 20 years. The first was just being asked to run for school board. I wasn't thinking about it. I was involved in the teacher and parent group at Century Park, and it was Steve Zinger. I don't know if any, well, of course, Bob, you remember Steve Zinger? He approached me and thought I would be a good person for the school board and an asset to what we were trying to do in Grandville. I ran 3 successful campaigns, and I have to thank my brother-in-law, the late Ron Palmer, and my campaign manager, Ray. He and Ron put out the signs across the district, and they told me it was because I had the Palmer name that I was going to win. And I think that's true because he comes from a family of educators. His grandfather, his grandmother were both educators here in Grandville. So I just feel very honored to be able to continue that Palmer tradition and the love for Grandville. I also would like to thank the previous board members and Bob too, because many of you helped me get reelected. Bob, you gave me a lot of advice at the time, and it helped, and I, was able to pull it off. And I'd like to thank the teachers union who supported me in all 3 of my elections. That's intimidating too, but they were very smart and decided to support me. Another highlight is passing of the 3 bonds that we have since I've been on board, and we have enhanced the school environment tremendously in the learning. How proud I am that, well, I don't know if you remember, but the 1-to-1, getting those computers, that was like huge, big time, and Grandville was doing it. I was so proud. Like, we are helping our kids to be great learners in this new world of the internet. And the new middle school, innovations to the high school in Oakstown, athletic fields, musical instruments, robo-dogs. I mean, it's just amazing what the community has done to support our schools. It definitely is a community effort way beyond our, the school board. We can do only so much, but it's really our parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles and friends and neighbors who supported the schools, and I can't thank them enough. It's why we are so great here in Grandville. Blue ribbon schools, top 15% of the high schools in the nation, Principal of the Year. I mean, it's just so exciting to me, and I tried to get Roger Superintendent of the Year, and I hope someone else will take over because he deserves it. And I can help write that if you want. So I'm really, really proud of our students and their teachers for these accomplishments. Another highlight was serving as president for 3 years. Thank you for mentioning that. I got to work with 2 amazing superintendents, Ron Kniff and, of course, Roger Barab. I've learned so much from them, and if it weren't for you 2, I probably would have made it 20 years because you and Ron both kind of protected us board members from any disadvantages that may come forward. We were ahead of it. We were notified of what to say, and really just made it a lot easier being on the board. Another thing that I think is really important to mention is that behind these 2 great leaders are other great leaders. And we have some spectacular leaders here with John Philo, Heather Roskowski, Dr. Scott Merkel. Thank you for making my job easy. I would come here and have everything in front of me that I needed. I would have all the information I needed. They would have done all their due diligence for us so that Bob could ask questions and we would, feel really good about all that they were doing. And behind those great leaders are our principals and those who bring innovation to our students, that bring best practices and a wealth of opportunities for learning. And I'm just going to mention a few that stuck out to me with the aeronautics program at the high school. I mean, we're working on planes and things that, who would have thought could do that? Maybe, astronauts at some point. The Computer Gaming Club, another great idea for kids that like the game. The Be Nice programming, I think that's just been a really great cultural environment that we've been building, that we love one another and we're going to take care of one another here in Grandville. Of course, our athletics and our band and orchestra and our arts and all of our award winners. It's just amazing when I think of all the kids that have received these kudos all the way up to the national level. And it's because of the community we've built here, I believe, in Grandville. The amazing shake, gotta mention that one too, it's awesome. Another highlight, bear with me, is completing the educational certification for school board members through the Michigan Association of School Boards. I did it. It was, at the time, really needed because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So, the association really helped me a lot, and I encourage you to also take those classes, take a couple conferences or something to check it out, because you'll find out that Grandville has got it going on. Some of the places that we spoke with the boards were against each other and worse than we have been. So I really think that we have a great culture here that continues to work all the way from the top of our organization all the way to our children. I also think we survived COVID-19, and I'm very, very proud of how our district handled that. We kept our kids in school, and we led other districts to help them keep their kids in school. That's leadership, and that's what really, I believe, even though we had masks, I really believe our kids did much better than some of the other kids that didn't have that opportunity to be in person, in place. So I thank all of you for that. And probably by far the greatest highlight I have and have had is with graduation. It's coming up. And seeing our seniors take that walk across the stage, I didn't even know these kids, and I was just full of excitement and, my sprinkles in me. It was just really great to see their smiling faces walk across for such a huge accomplishment. And of course, I got to give my two kids, Renee and Corey, here today, their diplomas. And I can't tell you what a great feeling that is, to give your child their diploma for all their hard work. And I had a chance to hug them on stage and get in the way of their photos. Which I have a neighbor that they picked their photo from graduation, and it's all of me, their daughter, completely, and they thought it was so funny, my neighbor. And I think that's the other piece too. I also got to give diplomas to neighbors, my niece and nephew, and again, friends from the neighborhood and all. So that was just probably by far the greatest memory. So today, I say farewell to you officially. We've sold our home of 30 years on Happy Hollow and have settled in Byron Center. I know my timing was a little off, finishing my term and settling into a new home, but I think you found an excellent replacement for me with Miss Amy Campbell, and I congratulate you on your appointment and enjoy every minute. I also thank you for your continued service to this great district. You all make it work well. And as I found my experience working with you, one of 7, right? I value, your input and all that you bring to the table. Now, I might not agree with everything that you brought, but I think it's so important that we value what is brought, and we work with it, and we learn from it. And like I said, we might not like it, but I think it's better for us to have that than to always be, rubber stamping, I suppose is what they say. So I do appreciate, even though it's tough. Some of the public comment that we receive is hard to hear, and I would sometimes leave this meeting a mess, honestly, but just ask my family. But I always came back because it's what we do here that makes it so important to come back. And I hope that I can, always see success, that you all continue the success of Grandville. So now, even though I live in Byron Center, who are Bulldogs, I have told Roger that I'll always be a Grandville Bulldog. And he tells all the seniors at graduation, when Roger did this the first time, I almost cried, and I might now. But he says to all the seniors, Grandville loves you. And if you need anything, ever, you gotta come back and see me. And that's how I'd like to be sent off, that you love me, that if I ever need anything, or if you ever need anything from me, that you'll let me know. And so thank you to Grandville who made this life experience for me all possible. It has been a true labor of love. So thank you and good night. Thank you for your diligence.
Thanks, Barb.
Letting me say a few words.
And we do love you, and if you need anything, you come back to us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barb.
Great
So
job.
Barb,
Great job.
20 years.
Yes, Bob.
There's a lot of tenure that walked out that door.
Yes.
So, thanks for your service.
I appreciate it, Bob. It's a lot.
I was going to give you a 1-minute warning, but I thought I better not because you were on a roll. But thank you. It was always exciting listening to you do the roll call votes.
Thank you. Started chirping with the audience. I have to apologize for some of my behavior.
Oh, you're fine. But it was nice serving with you.
It was all out of passion
Yeah.
and love for our school.
It was a pleasure serving with you, and thank you very much for your years of service.
Not everyone has to say everything. I know it's hard to say goodbye.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Barb.
Barb.
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you for all the gifts.
You're welcome.
I should retire more often.
All right. Moving on to consent action agenda. Can I get a motion there?
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to regular action items. 4A, the Kent ISD 2025-2026 budget resolution is recommended the Board of Education approve the attached resolution expressing support for the Kent Intermediate School District's 2025-2026 general fund budget. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support. All right.
We have Kevin Phillips with us here tonight from the Kent ISD, and he's going to go over their proposed budget.
So how do you follow that, right?
Yeah.
Let me give a budget spiel after those remarks.
Lift it up more, you know?
Yeah. And on top of that, there's gifts flying and all that. I feel like I should have showed up with flowers or gifts or whatever.
How do you make numbers emotional? Come on, let's hear it. All right, come on.
All right, I'm going to jump into it. Oops, that was the wrong side. There we go. And I'm going to stay pretty high level here, but feel free to ask questions at any point that you want, or when I get done, if you want to dive deeper into our finances, do so. But I wanted to try and keep this relatively high level and not get too deep into the weeds and just kind of give you an overview of where we are. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go through what our fund structure is at the ISD, because that looks a little bit different than a local district, as well as our sources of revenue, which look a little bit different than a local district. And then we'll jump into what our budget assumptions are in the proposed budget that we're presenting to you tonight, along with some of the top issues that are going on with our finances at the Kent ISD. And then I'll show you each of our funds' proposed budgets. I won't get into too much detail on those. I'll probably just talk about changes in fund balance, maybe one or two highlights, and then turn it over for questions. So keep in mind, we start our budgeting process at the ISD around the beginning of the year. We actually do some salary projections right after winter break. We kind of have this April 30 deadline of getting the budget out to all the local districts so you can consider it in May. So we really shoot for getting it done right around the time spring break starts. And then once everybody's back from spring break, the pressure's kind of on Kevin to put all the reports together and the presentations and get it out and start communicating with everybody. So from a fund structure perspective, as you know, most of your day-to-day operations roll through your general fund. We have three different funds at the ISD that are operational funds. We got our general fund, which has our instructional services, it has early childhood, it has adult education, and adult education is not only at the Kent ISD, but all the money flows through us from Ludington all the way down to Allegan and what they call Prosperity Region 4. And then a lot of our administrative expenses, whether that's superintendent's office, the business office, HR, we book those expenses in the general fund to start, and when I get to the bottom of the slide, I'll explain what we do at the end of the year. The Special Education Fund, that has the Act 18 money that we pass through to the local districts and center programs. The same for IDEA funding as well as Medicaid funding. But then we also have special education services and coaching that comes out of that fund. Kind of as an offshoot of the Special Education Fund, as you know, the ISD starting back in 2019 started absorbing the center-based special education programs, started with Grand Rapids Public in 2019. It then took on some other programs, 18 to 26-year-old transition programs, and some other things. Northview's hearing impaired program, we took that on and operate that now. So we pretty much have everything in the county housed out of the Kent ISD. And then finally, Career Tech Educational Fund, that would be the CTE programming. You've probably heard some about Career Prep 2030 and some of the things we're trying to do there. Launch U flows through the Career Tech Educational Fund. And then our information technology expenses and our facilities expenses are expensed out of that fund. And like I said later in the slide, when we talk about that data warehouse transfer, we do move the IT expenses around a little bit. Then on top of that, we have 3 different capital project funds. They're not quite as restrictive as you might have for bond funds when you have a bond issue or a construction program going here at a local district, but we have a capital project fund set up for each of those 3 operational funds. We use the general fund when it's a project not specific to center program facilities or our secondary programs. Obviously for special education, we're using that fund to take care of center program facilities, and then with our career tech, it's KCTC, My School, Launch U, and then whatever comes from Career Prep 2030 over the next few years, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have a smaller fund called the Cooperative Fund. That's where the My School at Kent program operates out of, and also the services we provide local districts. So whether that's within our business office, we do some payroll and accounts payable services. Our IT department does some services for local districts that runs through that Cooperative Fund. And then finally, the Community Service Fund, which is the enhancement millage, and you're all familiar with what's going on with that, and we're going to be going out for renewal in November. That's just a pass-through to all the local districts. So that's the fund structure. When I talked about some of these expenses that are originally booked to either the general fund or the Career Technical Education Fund, we do transfers at the end of the year. So we take those administrative costs and we divide those up amongst those 3 operating funds. It's roughly 15 to 20%. Ends up staying in the general fund. About 50% goes to the special ed fund, and then the remainder goes to the CTE fund. And then on the flip side, with the data warehouse transfer, we move some of the information technology costs to the other 2 funds, being special ed and general fund, based on the hours of service that we're providing for certain programs that relate to those funds. That'll probably be the longest slide of all of them. So, our sources of revenue, as you know, we're more property tax driven. We have 4 different millages that we levy. You can see the general, special ed, CTE, and enhancement. You can see what the millage rate is. That general fund millage rate is very small. So one of our concerns at the ISD with our finances with the general fund is our revenue growth is very limited within the general fund relative to special ed or CTE when you see increases in taxable value. Give you an example, we're going to be talking here in a little bit. We're assuming a 5% increase in tax collection revenue for next year. That only brings in about $150,000 for the general fund, but it brings in several million for the special ed fund. So it's a big difference from fund to fund there. And you can kind of see that in terms of the tax collection. So you can see the amount of money that we're projecting to raise next year with those levies. And then you can see how state funding and federal funding corresponds to the tax collections in terms of how it drives our revenues within the ISD. Out of that special ed, out of the $123 million, we're passing along about 95% of that to the local districts through the Act 18 distribution. Then finally, we take 1/10 of a mil out of the special ed millage and the CTE millage, and we set that aside and we transfer that money over to those respective capital project funds I talked about on the prior slide. So that provides about $3.6 million in today's dollars each year for those capital project funds. So as we look at the proposed 25-26 budget, the preliminary taxable value increase I'd gotten from the county was 6.2%. I've received the actual numbers. It came in at 6.3, so that was very, very close. We're budgeting for a revenue increase of 5%, and that's because you're probably familiar with the Headley Amendment. The inflation rate for 2025 is 3.1%, so you're going to probably have a little bit of a reduction in our millages due to the Headley amendment, as we haven't gotten those numbers yet from the county, but when we do, I expect that we'll probably see our millages reduce a little bit, and we'll end up with a net 5% increase. We're using the governor's budget proposal for state funding. Keep in mind, we start making some decisions in February. Hers is the only budget that's usually out at that point. This year, it's awfully late. You know, the Senate just came out last week with a budget. The House really hasn't put a legitimate budget out there yet, and probably won't till the end of May. So we're working off the governor's budget from a state funding perspective. Salaries, it's a 3% net scale increase for our employees plus a step increase. We're in the second year of 3-year collective bargaining agreements, so that's where we are for next year. Healthcare, this might look different than maybe what some local districts decide to do with their budgeting, but considering we were making these decisions back in January, you're probably familiar with House Bill 6058, which passed both the House and the Senate, but never got passed along to the governor. That would include a 7% one-time increase to Public Act 152. We've incorporated that increase into our assumption for healthcare for 2026 and what that cap number might look like. So overall, from 2025 to 2026, we budgeted for an 11.1% increase to that hard cap for the second half of the fiscal year. You're probably familiar a little bit with all the money moving back and forth between state funding for retirement, offset funding to go along with the contribution rates as a district. As we've been talking about at KSBO, even though the governor put out a $392 increase to the foundation allowance, the reality is the net change in retirement expenses along with some of that offset revenue is about a $200, $150 to $200 hit on a negative perspective. So from an ISD, and I'll show you this by fund here in a little bit, it's a $3.8 million negative impact when we look at our numbers for this year. And then really the big thing that this year is a little bit different than maybe some past years is we're moving some money to our capital project funds, $3 million over to our general ed cap project funds, $1.5 million from our general fund and $1.5 million from our special ed fund. That is to help fund the renovations we're doing at the ESC building where I'm located and we have a lot of meetings. We quite frankly ran out of workspace for people because we've been adding some positions and we're doing a restructuring on the interior of that building to provide more office space going forward. And then because our fund balances have grown so much the last few years due to the rapid increase in taxable values here in the county, we're going to shift $10 million out of our special ed fund into the special ed cap projects fund and $10 million out of the career tech fund into our CTE cap projects fund. The reason on the special ed side is Empower You, our 18 to 26-year-old transition program, is growing like crazy. We're pretty much tapped out for space now, and we're hearing that we could have as many as 75 additional students in that program for next year. So just moving some money over for whatever we might have to do there. And then the $10 million on the career tech side is to fund a potential satellite campus that we've been talking about as part of the Career Prep 2030 program. And then I talked about that Empower You growth. The budget's got 30 additional students in it, but the current estimate's about 75 students. So what is in red is really, I feel, is important. When I look at finances and when I try to explain school finance, I always talk about where are you from a structural perspective. Where is your ongoing revenues versus your ongoing expenses? It's just like your home budget, right? You might take some one-time money out of there to buy something nice, but if your expense structure is outrunning what you bring in income every month, at some point you're going to run out of money and you can't do that. The good news is our structural surpluses continue to be large. You can see the general fund's about 1.8 million, special ed fund 8.4, and the career tech about 3 million.
So just,
Yeah, go ahead.
Those are surpluses, because it confused me when I read it the first time, because I'm like, it's red. And
Yeah,
I'm in that boat, red's usually bad.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I have to say surplus and it's red. So just wanted to make sure I understood.
That's a good point. I used red just to make sure it was important,
Yes,
more so
yeah.
than negatives.
Gotcha.
I won't spend too much time on this slide because I kind of talked about everything that was important. You know, with the taxable values, we've seen a 51% increase over the last 8 years here in the county. This year, 6.3%, but the 3 years before that were 7, 8.6, and 9.1. So they have data at the county level. It goes back to the beginning of Proposal A, and that's the best 3 years in that 25-year plus time frame. And as I've been trying to educate people at the ISD, the good times won't last forever as it relates to that, right? So we'll have to be prepared for that. I mentioned the health insurance, that's a big part there. You can see the other things in there. From our perspective, because we're a big organization, what has really changed the last few years is investment income. If you went back to right in COVID there, when interest rates were virtually zero, we had $40,000 in investment income on our money in the bank. We made $5.5 million last year. We're around $5.2 million for this year, and then we expect some rate cuts and probably a drop in earning rates as we go through 25, 26. We're still at $4.5 million. So that's a big change, right? To go from $40,000 to $5 million, it really helps us fund some things. I mentioned that impact of the net of retirement revenues and expenses and tried to lay it out here by fund. You can see the impact's pretty small for the general fund. 147A4 was funding just for this year to give it an assumed 5.25% reduction to the retirement rate. This all gets into healthcare liabilities being fully funded. 147A3 was a batch of funding that ISDs got for the first time this year. That is the same kind of batch of funding that a local district's been getting for 10 or 12 years. It was the original 147A funding. And then 147G is that pass-through for the 3% employee healthcare contributions that we've all enjoyed so much this year. And then on the retirement expense side, you know, here the negative numbers are unfavorable, the positive numbers are favorable. Overall, the retirement expenses are going to be a little bit lower this year, but they're not lower to the extent that we're losing revenue year over year. So that's how you get the 3.8 million hit. The ones that are taking the big hit are center programs, and that's kind of instructive when we get to that slide, about 1.5 million, and then our special ed fund at about 1.6 million. So getting into each of the funds, and like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these. The general fund, our proposed budget would have us using $172,000 of fund balance, but keep in mind we've got that $1.5 million transfer into the capital project funds. We also have $500,000 budgeted for the cost of promoting and renewing the enhancement millage. So that's kind of a one-time cost as well. So there's really $2 million in kind of one-time costs there, and that's how you get to the 1.8 million structural surplus. You can see the fund balance history there. Even with using a small amount of fund balance, the fund balance is at an all-time high level within the general fund right now, which is good news. Special education, the proposed budget's to use about $7 million of our fund balance, which would takes us from $21 million down to $14.4. That seems like a big hit, but keep in mind there's $15.5 million of one-time things in there. You've got the $10 million transfer to the capital projects fund. You got the $1.5 million going to the gen ed cap projects, and then we're doing $4 million in supplemental Act 18 distributions for local districts. So if you took all that out, you've got that positive structural balance of about $8.4 million. And in reality, if you look at the top, even though this fund is about a $230 million fund, $145 million of that is pass-through funding to local districts. And then you got some grant funding in there as well that gets passed through to local districts. The true actual services and supports, kind of the personnel costs and all that of the special ed fund is only about $12.4 million. So to have a $14 million fund balance when you really have $12 million of services is an elevated number. Over the long haul, we really want to bring that down to about $5 million. We're just trying to do it wisely and do it slowly and not spend that too quickly and then have yourself in a situation where you got to make some other changes. Center programs, that is a program where the net expense usually gets billed back to the local district. So this is one that's always of interest to the KSBO group when we talk about it. The good news is you can kind of see the history there for excess costs and tuition. What used to be kind of a $5 to $10 million cost to the locals has really reduced. In 22-23, we actually ended the year with a fund balance in that fund, so the districts didn't have to pay anything. Last year it was less than $400,000, and right now we're budgeting to end with a fund balance again. A lot of that's due to we've had a lot of vacancies. Special ed and especially these center program positions are hard to fill. It's difficult work with some of these students. Similar to other districts that are really struggling with maybe some of their special ed staffing. We've made a lot of progress though this year. We're almost to a point where we're almost fully staffed, but the last couple of years have been pretty challenging. So when you look at next year, the projected excess cost is about $3.5 million, and I kind of tried to break that into some categories up top. You have the $1.5 million hit we're seeing with the state retirement program. It's about a little less than $500,000 to put in that 7% one-time adjustment to PA 152, and then giving that 3% raise to employees plus steps. kind of compared with what we're going to bring in for Act 18 revenue, state revenue. There's a little loss of some specialized state funding, 56.7. That's about a $1.8 million increase compared to where we were for this year. So the $3.5 million is the initial budget. We see that usually step down as the year goes on. I think it'll come in less than that $3.5 million. I think our steady state is really about $2 to $2.5 million if we're fully staffed and we see actual costs at the end of the year, which is still good compared to where we were historically. The Career Tech Fund, using about $7.7 million of fund balance, but as you can see, that takes us from $24.5 million down to $16.8. And once again, you got that $10 million transfer, so the structural surplus is really just under $3 million. You can see how the fund balance has grown since 1920, so even taking this hit to bring it down to $16.8 million, it's certainly elevated over where we were a few years ago. Co-op Ed Fund, pretty much break even. It's a smaller fund, about $5 million. My school runs a little bit of a structural deficit, which is fine. It's a valuable program. We're happy with that. It's got a fund balance that we can use within that co-op educational fund. And you can see the fund balance is very healthy. That's $3 million for roughly a $5 to $6 million budget. The Community Service Fund, that's just the enhancement millage. I think the great news is that we're projecting about $350 per student next year. For historical purposes, that started at $210 back in 2017. It has far exceeded what the projections were when we first got that millage passed. I think the idea was maybe it would get to $280 or so before we had to renew it again, but because of what's gone on in Kent County, we're at a point where we're at $350 per student. And then finally, our capital projects funds. The general ed one, pretty much everything we see for expenses relates to that renovation project in our educational services building. We are doing security camera and public address system upgrades throughout all of our facilities, so you see some of that is in there as well. And then the funding coming in, $1.5 million from the general fund and $1.5 million from special ed, as we mentioned earlier. On the special ed side, we've got about $5.6 million in projected expenses. We got some work we need to do over at KEC Oakley. That's a building that we haven't really touched, but we need to get to. Lincoln Playground, we budgeted for that. I'm not sure that's going to happen now this year. We're putting pause on that to make sure we do the right things. But you can see some of the other smaller projects, the parking lots, doing some work in Empower U facilities, PA systems, and whatnot. So really that $10 million is in there to determine what we need to do with Empower U. If we need to purchase another building, add on to one of our current facilities. We also have got some work to do at Mayfield and also, which is Empower U Central, as well as Lincoln Developmental Center. So having that money in that fund balance is good for going forward. And then finally, with the CTE cap projects, there's not much going on this year. We've been doing work at KCTC. We've had a couple phases of upgrades in that main building we have on our campus. We are starting to work on the planning for putting in a more formal secured entry. That building's kind of unique. If you've ever been to our KCTC building, it's got the spokes and, you know, kind of just a common area in the middle. So we're working on the design for a more secured entry for students and visitors. So that's really kind of the architectural work you see budgeted for next year, and then we intend to get that going in 26, 27. And then obviously we have the money for put away now for whatever we might want to do for a potential satellite campus in the next year or two. So with that, hopefully I didn't take too much time, give too much information, but I can take any questions you might have.
I have a few. So, fund balance, right? So you look at, okay, property values aren't going up, your percentage of 5%, okay. But if you look at the last 6 years where fund balance has come, it's grown significantly across everywhere. Act 18 is a levied tax, correct?
Yes.
Is there any discussion, has there been any discussion from leadership, admin, the board, to potentially reduce that for the citizens of Kent County?
We haven't had that conversation yet because we still have a lot of our districts that are still using general fund dollars to support special education services. So I think I would like to see more progress made towards reducing that deficit on behalf of different districts. And I think if we can get that squared away, and if we knew we had our capital issues squared away with center programs, then I think that's a starting point for the conversation. But at this point, we haven't talked about it.
Has there been any discussion on, or with the changes that are happening with the federal Department of Education, any opportunity for increased funding due to block grants now that they're, dismantling the administrative state and trying to, funnel the true funds uninhibited to the states?
I haven't heard of any potential increases. Quite frankly, I'm more concerned about the opposite right now with, the idea of trying to reduce the federal deficit and what they might do there. I mean, I think there's a lot of concern about Medicaid funding, which is about $10 million that we pass through the special ed fund, whether that might get cut. Because I think if you look at the $1.4 trillion that's been kind of thrown out there publicly as kind of the marker at the federal level, my reading of it is you can't really get there without touching one of the entitlement programs, and we fear that Medicaid would be the one that might get touched. On the flip side, I mean, you might be right. There might be some positives on the other side, but we haven't heard of anything at this point.
Yeah, but there's a lot of movement, so.
It changes
dust has
almost
not
daily,
settled,
right? Yeah.
The dominoes are still falling from that perspective.
Yep.
So with regard to House Bill 6058, isn't that stalled due to language issues and there's lawsuits going on?
That's correct. Yeah, it's in the courts.
Is it anticipated that it's gonna be resolved? Because
I'm
no one
just
really
I'm
knows.
going to give you my opinion. I don't have any.
That's why you're here, and
That's
I
why I'm here.
appreciate
So I'm going to give my opinion. I think when it's all said and done, yes, it's caught up in the courts. The Court of Claims basically didn't want to put a position on it, so they said yes, it should have been passed along to the governor, but no, we're not going to order it. So now it's going to move on to the appeals court. What I think is going to happen, there's a lot going on in Lansing, and it's very possible we're going to be into September before we see a state budget, including potentially a school aid fund budget, right? So I think at the end of the day, roads is a huge issue at the state level politically. House Bill 6058 is now a bargaining chip for the roads and the budget and what might happen with federal funding. I think they'll all come together at some point, and I think House Bill 6058, as it's currently written, has some very poor language about how that cap would go up in future years. I think the governor will end up vetoing that bill, but then a replacement bill will be ready in this whole grand bringing everything together that will end up probably doing the 7% one-time increase and probably keeping future year cap increases kind of where existing language is. That's just
Okay.
my opinion on it.
All right, well, it's good to know, right?
Yep.
I don't get much, but I got you, so thank you for that. Thanks for the overview.
You're welcome.
Wait, I'm offended now. You don't get much?
From a county
I'm kidding,
perspective.
I'm kidding.
Oh, it hurt his feelings now.
No.
So my question always is, what keeps you up at night? What's got you concerned? What's got you worried?
Yeah. General fund lack of revenue growth has always kept me up at night since I started at the ISD. I mean, 5% on our property tax collections and roughly 4 or 5% on what our unrestricted state money we get in our general funds called Section 81. Each of those bring about 150,000. So, I mean, 300,000 a year is not a lot to work off of with that size budget. The majority of the general fund is grant funded. So GSRP, which is growing like a weed due to MyLeap and all their things, is becoming almost the dominant factor within that general fund. And then you have adult ed in there as well, which is another 7 to 10 million. My concern is just that we don't have the room to add in the instructional areas. So instructional services, continuous improvement, some of those things are funded 100% out of the general fund. And as much as we might like to ramp up more help in that area, we got to be very cognizant of it. And, if the GSRP grant ever got to a point where it started, and it was kind of in this situation when I first got to the ISD, it was at a point where we were using about $800,000 a year of general fund money to support the grant because it hadn't seen an increase in funding in 7 years. Now it's flipped. It was way behind the foundation allowance. Now it's ahead of it. So we're in a much better position. But just the size of that grant, and if we ever got out of whack with that grant, that's going to start really affecting what we have left to support it with. The other one is probably Career Prep 2030 is a wonderful initiative, and I think it's a great thing. We're trying to double it. But when we start talking about a satellite campus, the least of my concerns is building something and having the money for that. it's what it costs to run a satellite campus, and we've made some early estimates, and we think it's around $2 million plus a year. And if you just saw what I said, we have about a $3 million structural surplus. That kind of eliminates that structural surplus, right? So, and if you get that combined with a slowdown in the economy and whatnot, that would be probably my second biggest concern.
Well, then when you look at your staffing issues you talked about, right? So it's great because you're saving a little bit of money, but what does that do in your services? And if you got to staff a whole different facility, right?
Yep.
That's
As
a challenge.
somebody on that committee, I think kind of what we're doing, and maybe the ISD supporting districts and areas that do things like, I mean, when you look at the programming we have, you look at even right now with the Weller Tech Center that's going in as an example, there may be opportunities other than building another regional building, maybe having some local district satellites. And I mean, we're here, Byron Center's not very far, Wyoming's not very far, and maybe we can do some partnering in some of those things with facilities that some of us have.
For sure. And the other
That might
part
be
I
better.
didn't put in here because I wanted to keep it just to the Ken ISD budget is, we've also had conversations, do we partner with a Davenport or a Ferris State or something like that? They've shown some interest and maybe they could help fund some of the cost of a satellite facility, so.
Are there
Thank you.
other high schools that are doing that push-in stuff like we are doing with Weller and with the aeronautics stuff and all that stuff?
There is some out there, some various programs that are running out there, but I think, it's still in a very infant stage for people, but I think there is some momentum. The problem is you run into when districts don't have facilities to be able to do that, that can be a challenge. But if we can get some universities to partner, or if we have, like us, where we happen to have a place, maybe we can do some things there too to help. But it's hit or miss right now, very infant stages.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Okay. So we have to do a vote on this. Let's do a
Yeah.
roll call vote.
Van Eck. Yes. Steffes.
Yes.
Gardine, yes. DeHaan.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Wonderjum.
Yes.
Hybor.
Yes.
Unanimously.
Motion. Thank you very much. Great. Now on to discussion. 5A, the Kent ISD biannual election board discussion.
Yes, so as you know, biennially, I guess you would say, there's an election at the Kent Intermediate School District. They have 2 6-year term seats on their school board. They are currently occupied by Laura Featherston, and she's a treasurer, and David Drake, who's a trustee. We received word today that the 2 incumbents are running and nobody is opposing at this moment. There is an additional, I believe May 8th is the official deadline. So if there are more candidates, I will let you guys know about that. In your next packet, and we're talking about this as an informational thing today because you have to have 2 board meetings at your local level. One's for informational and seeing the resolution that's here and talking about it. Then next time you'll vote on it. Next time though, in that packet, you'll have the information about each candidate. They have written some information about themselves, so you'll have that to go on. We'll also need to determine a person to go to the ISD on Monday, June 2nd to represent our board's vote on those people that we are saying are our choices. And then we need a backup person from this board too, in case something happens to that person. I think in my 10 years, we've only had one time where the backup had to go instead of the actual person. I know Bob's gone many times for it. You'll do it?
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. And then, so he has some background. So Joe, if you want to
talk to Bob. I'm sure he could fill you in on what he does down there.
Okay.
With that. Do we have a backup, since Joe has already said he would go for us?
I don't mind, I can do it. Yeah.
Be a backup? Is that, okay? Good, that's good to know. Any questions about this at all at this time? Just wanted to bring it up. Like I said, next time you'll see it as an action item. We'll vote on the resolution, including the candidates. If we, for some reason in the next day or two, get additional candidates, I'll let you guys know. Okay?
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then on to 5B, the artificial intelligence report for 2024-2025.
Yes. So as you know, one of the 3 district goals we had was looking at AI, digging into it more, looking at policy, looking at guidelines of philosophy, if you will. And Adam Langto and Mike Kennedy are here. They have led that committee that we've had for our district and done a fantastic job. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to them.
Yeah, so, Roger has mentioned we need to get in front of this, and so I'll kind of give some overview, and then I'm going to let Mike talk about things from a more in-depth perspective. Mike has been instrumental, so I want to give him a shout out. He has really, got his hands dirty with this, dove into the conversation, has been participating at the state level with MASSP conversations and collaborating with local administrators across the state to figure out, where we're at with this. And, as Michael mentioned, we started this out and I think everyone felt like we were behind. And now I think when we're coming to the conclusion of this year and just having conversations with, other colleagues and other schools, we feel like we're in a really good place about where we're heading in terms of doing it from a standpoint of not just going all in without guardrails and policy and, training and things like that. So I just want to give Mike a shout out for that. So we put a committee together, consisted of our superintendent, our assistant superintendent of curriculum, assistant superintendent of human resources, myself, Mike Kennedy, our tech director, Walt, Ken, our middle school principal, Tyler, our middle school assistant principal, Brian Mulder as the Oakstown principal, Stacy Bile as the Oakstown curriculum and engagement strategist, and then we chose teachers from each of those levels. On there, their last names are represented. I can speak to the first names of the high school teachers, but I don't want to forget the first names of our Oakstown teachers because I just met them this year. So either way, they have been phenomenal from a standpoint of, this is a great group of, when you see from all the way from Roger's position down to the classroom in terms of giving us various perspectives of, what is needed, what is considering, and I can tell you our teachers have been fantastic on there, just giving us things from their perspective of what they need from us or what they need to be able to have in order to be successful on this. Ingrid Vredovo, just a shout out for her. She actually attended a conference out east on the East Coast as a part of some ongoing work from her master's program and undergrad program, and she brought back a wealth of knowledge to the committee as well. So just really appreciate everyone engaging in this work. So just a quick little overview, kind of the purpose, right, of why we wanted to get in this, and you guys know this too, but from our level at the high school and all the way down to kindergarten, right, like our job is to prepare students to go out to the career force. And in Michigan, we want to make sure that there's a strong workforce coming out of our K-12 system, going into the ability to innovate, create jobs, and bring talent into the state of Michigan. One of those goals in the Growing Michigan Together report talked specifically, and I highlighted in blue there, like all students will develop future-ready skills and competencies to thrive in the work and life. And then that second bullet point about reimagining the job of teaching and the structure of the school day, enabling educators to innovate so students can learn for life. And when we look at those goals out of that report, it's obvious that we need to make sure that we are continuing to adapt and change and innovate in the K-12 system to meet the needs of industry in our state and across the nation and in the country or the world as well, right? And so when you look at that, AI is going to have an impact on that. We've talked to several parents, we've talked to several business owners and companies that come in for our career fairs, or, I was talking with Brendan about it last night of just about, how his company and stuff like that, talking to friends about how they're using AI. And this becomes something that's not just a social media thing. It's not just to create great memes and things like that, right? Students need to be able to understand what they're using this for so that they can walk into careers that have this as a competency and be able to be knowledgeable about it. And we need to, as educators, not be scared to embrace what artificial intelligence can be, because it really can be something that is valuable and an add-on in reimagining what the K-12 system looks like. So our goal was this, using AI, how can we reimagine and innovate the educational experience for Bulldog students using our existing systems and structures so that they are engaged in their learning in order to be prepared for post-secondary education in the world of work. Additionally, using AI, how can we maximize our educators' time to focus on helping students? One of the things that Mike will talk about, and I know that Roger touches on as well, is, AI really is creating opportunities for that one-on-one support, that tutoring support, that independent, direct instruction that might not have always been there, ability to free up teachers in the classroom, but also as you go home, there's resources that students can use. And I think those of us who've ever tried to help our students at home, looking at some of the work that comes home at times, it can be very challenging, but also leveling the playing field for students who come from multi-language backgrounds. We're seeing great success with our ML teachers using this to help support students. So it's creating opportunities that we never thought possible or never had maybe the staffing power or the time and energy to do. And so starting at the classroom level, that tier 1 level of our MTSS system, rethinking our role as educators from transmitters of knowledge to designers of learning experiences, right? Anyone can, content is plentiful out there at this point, but how can we design experiences for students to create, explore, research, analyze, and do something with that content? Looking at our guaranteed and viable curriculum process, making sure that everyone is experiencing targeted essential content that's transparent so they understand what the success criteria is as students so that they can meet the expectations that our educators have and have those things aligned to state and local content standards that we have. We're looking at our PLC process. What do we want students to know and be able to do? How do we know if they've learned it? What do we do if they haven't learned it? And how can we enrich and extend learning? AI is playing a part of that. Our classroom PBIS structures, what does that look like from using AI, and how can that be infiltrated into that? And then create active learning environments that foster critical thinking, collaboration, and problem-solving skills. Again, what can we do that can help our students go out into the workforce, out into the post-secondary world, and be ready to get jobs, innovate, create, and be successful. All right, and lastly, we need to engage and educate our community, our students, and our educators on what AI is. And we've talked a lot about that as a community. It's not just about internal. We need to educate our community, our parents, because there's a lot out there about AI. There's a lot of scary things about AI. There's a lot of concerning things, but there's also a lot of great things. And so we just need to balance all of that out there, and our educators as well, because there is things that, yes, students are using that to get a quick advantage on writing a paper or, just, doing that. But that's where we need to educate ourselves on that. And if we're creating experiences where AI can just easily generate answers, maybe we need to rethink how we are designing learning at that piece. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and then he'll go through there, and then I'll wrap it up on what the committee was able to produce over this course of this year. So.
Thanks for the kind words. And to quote my friend Ann Waldy, thanks, friend. So talking about careers, I'm going to give you a lot of stuff that's really within the last 6 to 9 months. So this came from Microsoft's Learning Labs. And there's a lot of numbers there, but the one that says 71% I think really stood out to me. I was at the McCall conference in October where this was shared, and it says leaders are more likely to hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced one without them, right? The ground is starting to shift beneath us in a lot of ways from an employment standpoint. And I look at our seniors from last night at the senior awards, like these are really bright people who are going to go off to do amazing things. I want them equipped to do those amazing things. And I know how great they are, but I want them to be far superior to those who they're going to compete with for those jobs. So that number really stood out to me, that our biggest corporations they're now saying AI is almost a necessity, if not a necessity. This just came out last month. If you're familiar with the company Duolingo, they do a lot of work with interpretation, translation skills, learning a language. I've used it myself at times. And then if you're familiar with Shopify, Shopify was more of like a leak. It wasn't supposed to come out, but it was an internal memo. And they basically said, you can't work here and not know AI anymore. And Duolingo just came out last week, same kind of thing. They're moving their entire platform more AI based, but if you're working for these companies now, you have to know how to use these things, these tools, these resources, just like you would learn how to use a computer, right? There was a person at one of the conferences, and when he was talking about AI, he said, "This is fire. This is electricity." Like it has that big of an impact on what the future is going to be. And I keep thinking about 1909, for example. Well, why that year? People were still riding around on horses, but there were some people already starting to drive cars. And I think we're kind of like in that world where some people are very scared of AI. They think the robots are coming to get them, and I'm not saying they're right, I'm not saying they're wrong. And then there are those who treat it as an entertainment feature. I look at it from the educator mind, like what a golden opportunity to transform experiences for students. So this is not something I made up. I think we've maybe all seen the technology adoption life cycle. If you see where it says early majority, that little hourglass, I would argue that's where we're at. As a staff, in my own personal life, as I talk to people, if they're willing, I will talk about this topic any given opportunity. They probably get annoyed with me at this point. I think that's where we're at. And it kind of matches up with some data I took back at the midpoint of the year. I'll just click on this real quick here just to kind of give you this is what our staff said in terms of how they are using it, how they're thinking about it. So if you look at just, are we using it? Like, let's just think about from a staff standpoint. I didn't even really get into students a whole lot. I just wanted to see, what are the adults doing with AI? Right about this time last year, we had a staff meeting and we started to prime them with, start getting comfortable with understanding what this is. Try some stuff, play with it over the summer. Not a lot of people did, but that's okay. But I think we've got a fairly healthy amount of people who are using it, dabbling, aware, which is a good sign. But I think, sometimes what do I do with this now? I think that's where the creativity piece comes in, because we've never had to use this before. Like, what does that look like? In terms of, I asked people, how are they using it? Like, what are you using it for? For the most part, you can see here, it kind of is a personal assistant at work. Top reasons staff responded with was helping craft emails. Tone is important in email. And so using it to help soften the blow or to sound more professional, or just a few examples. One of my favorites, differentiation. Everybody's mind works a little bit differently. And for 150 years, we've basically worked on a model that says we're all going to do the same thing at the same time in the same way. And we know now with greater scientific research that everybody's mind is slightly different in some ways, and this creates a great opportunity to use this tool to really tap into that. Lesson planning, test quiz generation, student research, visual projects, rounded out the top reasons. Last spring, we threw at them a variety of platforms that they could try, mess around with, and got some feedback on what people were using most. And far and away, the two big ones, Gemini and ChatGPT, it makes sense, right? Most people drink Coke or Pepsi. They don't go for, RC Cola, right? It's out there, it's delicious, whatever. They're going to stick with the big brands. Same here with AI. I'm really proud of our ML teachers at the high school. They were the first to say, hey, we heard you know something about AI, tell us. And they jumped on it, and they've been really at the forefront of this, using Diffit, for example. Chris Grunhau introduced us to Flexi. It's an open source CK12 program or platform that's been fantastic. I actually sat with a kid in my office about a month ago. He can't figure out algebra to save his life. And mom's like at her wit's end. She's like, I don't know what to do. He goes and sees his teacher. He still keeps failing. I said, okay, are you okay if I show him some AI stuff? She's like, yes, please. I use it at my work. I'm like, oh, beautiful. I called the right parent. And it's working, right? We're using Flexi with him, and it's guiding him. Doesn't give him the answers, but it's guiding him to an understanding of the concepts so that he feels that empowerment and that confidence to tackle it himself. So that's very edifying, at least on a singular case. So yeah, you can see there a lot of the different platforms, but again, the big ones tend to be the most. We asked, are you interested in training? And overwhelming majority said yes. I'd love to pick the brain of the 21% who said no.
Well, it's the same that are using it minimally,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the exact same percentage. So.
And I've had some conversations with individuals in the hallways, and yeah, there's some real anti-AI folks out there. And I can give you my theory as to why, but that's maybe for another time. And then when we asked, okay, if you want more training, what does that look like? What should that look like? If you had everything you wanted, what would it look like? And workshops and conferences, right? Small group workshop, online tutorials, all kind of came in about even. So I think people are kind of open to whatever. And so that's going to be a big part of our summer planning is, okay, what does it look like? Because I can sit with people one-on-one, and I do. And I have great conversations, and we daydream, and we come up with all kinds of really cool ways to do it. But we've got to do something a little bit more formal. Back in August, I presented just to kind of, hey, does everybody know what this is? Because I can't assume that 100 staff members in front of me know anything about this. So once we sort of set that foundation, I think we're in a good place to start designing some learning opportunities for them. Let me go back to this. Again, why at least I think, and I think our committee thinks this matters, is again, it goes back to that personalizing of learning for students. Not that they're on their own. I think a lot of times people get worried saying, well, you're just going to let kids just they're on their own. No, not at all. It personalizes it. I think one of the big words we've used a lot in the last few years is engagement. And when things feel like it's hitting right here, it's going to start hitting here. And so I think personalizing can really help to draw students in who maybe are a little bit more reticent to sit in the back of the room, put their head down because it's hard, I don't get it, this doesn't make any sense, I'm going to check out. Teaching is hard. It's a lot of work, and a lot of times AI can, I think, increase efficiency. It helps, like I've used it when I'm like, I don't know what to come up with for this, but start using AI, okay, now it gets my wheels turning, now I'm coming up with stuff, and I'm like, okay, sweet, I'm back in the game, so to speak. I think communication is huge. We are a public service, so you are working with adults and students all the time, communicating with them, supporting them. This can help with that. I have a friend who teaches in another district, or who is an administrator in another district. He had a year-long battle with a parent. Just no matter how he emailed, it was met with resistance, strife. He's like, fine, I'm going to go with AI to see if it can help solve this. And I don't want to say AI is magic, but the next email was the breakthrough email that started to soften, and they could work together and help this family and this student at school. It helps analyze data. I think one of the biggest complaints I hear from colleagues is we don't have time to go through the data of how students are actually doing. And what's interesting is that slideshow I just showed you with PyGrid, I used AI to crunch all my data, and it did it in seconds. And I was able to sift through it, and okay, that's helpful, that's interesting. Don't know where that's coming from, right? So you have to vet things, but it helps take away that time factor. You can see the trends. And I think what I like most is the last two bullet points. Having spent 16 years in the classroom, you know there are kids, and I hate to say this, but they didn't need me, okay? They were with me for an hour every day. They didn't need me. They were really good at school. They were really sharp. They had supportive families. They just got my subject better than other students. But but they wanted to talk to me about it. They still wanted to be validated and valued and seen and heard, and that's great, and I would always do that. But it was taking time away from students who weren't seen, who weren't heard, who weren't valued, who weren't supported, who needed me more. And that was always hard. I still think back how many kids maybe I let down because I couldn't be there for them because other students needed me, right? So I think, this frees the teacher up to really help get to those students, in my opinion. And then obviously workforce. I have a 17-year-old, I have a 14-year-old. They are Eagles. They have chosen poorly in life, but that's because my wife works there and we live there. But either way, I look at them. They're gonna walk into the work world quicker than I can even blink. Are they ready? Do they have those skills that they're going to be required of them? So it's going to challenge how we see the classroom, I think. And I think a lot of researchers back this up. This presentation is not just my opinion. This is all backed by a number of different researchers. But teachers as the gatekeepers of knowledge, in my opinion, that was gone when the internet came out. But we still stuck to that sort of role. I did. I loved being the smartest person in the room. That felt great. But it's increasingly not necessary anymore. So we have to help students with learning, right? Teaching is an adult-driven experience. Learning is a student-driven experience. And we need to start helping students learn, not just experience what a teacher is providing them. More differentiation, more collaboration, project-based, less traditional assessment. I've already had some really cool conversations with staff members about, does assessment have to be a test? Like in that traditional sense. And it's really started getting the wheels turning. I'm not saying we're like throwing everything out the window. We shouldn't. But it's getting folks to start thinking about, okay, this might be a way to get that kid to unlock their learning that maybe writing something on a piece of paper isn't doing up to this point. And it can really help with our PLC process, identifying essential skills, developing success criteria, writing learning targets. I've seen it a lot. And here's the big secret. Kids are already using it, right? Let's be honest. My kid uses it all the time with my guidance and with my oversight. And I'm not going to read all these stats to you. The one that strikes me as the most important, though, is that second bullet point, the white bullet point there. The majority of students, and it's probably closer to 75% now based on a published paper that just came out last week. The students who are using it the most are students, in most cases, who have 3 hours or more of homework. Kids are busy. And for good or for bad. They may have jobs. They may be in sports. Some of your children are heavily involved in all sorts of extracurriculars, different groups, whatever. They are but they value their education, and so sometimes I think we sometimes confuse compliance and learning, right? And so I want to be a good student. I want to please my teacher. I want them to be proud of me. I will do all the things I've got to do. I watch my own son do this. And it's filling out worksheets in some cases. It's doing a thing, and I go, what's that about? Help me understand that. I don't know. I don't know what it's about. I got to get it done, though. And my son's an AP student. He's not just sort of, well, whatever. So that number is really striking to me because students will use the thing that will get the job done the quickest, just like any human would. So it makes me ask the question, if I'm in the classroom, am I creating meaningful, purposeful learning experiences for students? That's not something they're just going to quick throw into an AI to get an answer, right? You can look at more research. Feel free to check this out. Harvard Gazette, MIT, NPR. We're seeing more and more students, not only at the high school, but at the collegiate level using AI, and we're seeing positive results, right? And we're going to get more body research as we go, but in the first really year and a half of this really being a public thing, we're seeing a lot of benefits to it when used in the right way, right? If it's just get an answer, that's probably not the best use of AI. This just came out a couple weeks ago. They tracked why people are using it. Interesting. Look at what jumped to #1 this year. I mean, that's wild. I can give you a million of examples of why I think that's #1, given the stuff I've seen, but I'll just give you one brief one. There's something called Friend AI. It's a necklace that you wear. It's got an AI bot in it, and you can talk to it all day long. It is your therapist, it is your friend, it is your confidant. There's the Joaquin Phoenix movie, what is it? Her, yeah. Just stunning, right? That this is becoming so integrated into life that it is indeed, dare I say, replacing life in some ways for people.
Didn't they just also have some very negative things about that come out recently?
Yeah. It's said some very, it encouraged young people to make some really bad choices. Right? And so it's kind of, when it first came out, people were like, oh, okay. But now it's a wake-up call because there is some of that negative side to it. I don't know if you're familiar with Will Richardson. He wrote a book called 9 Questions Every School Must Ask. I'm not going to read all this to you, but I think he really hits on the point that students are starved for real relationship. And again, I'm not going to judge a home. I'm not going to judge a student's life, but I see it every day. Kids just want to be heard and seen and valued, and they will do some really strange things, some really funny things, some really cool things, and some really dangerous things. That's where the educator plays such a significant role, but a lot of times we are, I don't want to say burdened, because it's a good burden, it's a passion, right? But we are loaded with a lot of things to do that AI can maybe free us up to really connect with those students. And I think can really transform the classroom to one where everybody's getting everything that they need. And maybe like, oh, you're just pie in the sky, Pollyanna. Maybe, but why not shoot for the moon and see what we get, you know? And I think this is one of the big fears. AI is not going to replace teachers. You cannot replace teachers. It's going to change the function and role of a teacher, I think, but it's not going to replace us. We are too valuable. Professional educators, we are too valuable. We play such a significant role. And I think if we really leaned into that and really lived and believed that, I think we would see, oh yeah, then AI makes a lot of sense, right? I think a lot of times teachers don't believe in themselves enough, right? Obviously, I appreciate you bringing up the point about, you know, the dangers. There's a lot of ethical and legal stuff that we have to make sure we are protecting our students from, okay? These are companies who want to make money, right? And that's the cynic in me. Yeah, they want to help students, and that's great, but at the end of the day, they're hoping to turn a profit so they can pay their shareholders and they can pay their employees, right? Now, my hope would be they're doing both well, right? But we've worked with the Kent ISD, and I'll show you some stuff in a little bit. We worked with the Kent ISD, and Walt's been instrumental in helping us look at, okay, what do we have to do to make sure our students are safe online, right? Because we have kids as young as 3 and 4, and students as old as 18, right? And 19 in some cases. How do we protect everybody while still providing them a really good experience, a learning experience? How do we make sure that we're using it in a proper way, right? So we've spent a lot of time this year just looking at those challenges. And the collegiate level really has helped, looking at what they have done, helping us to sort of gain an understanding of, okay, here's what this maybe looks like at the secondary and even the elementary level. One of my big favorite things is to just share with people, here's how you can use this. Because I can throw a million tools and resources at people, and that feels overwhelming. But if you start talking about things they got to do every day, like, hey, this could do this for you or help you, suddenly they get a little bit more in tune. So personalized learning, as mentioned before, grading and assessment. We've moved to the formative platform. What an amazing experience teachers are already having using that to help generate content, assessment, analyze data. Content creation, a teacher came up to me, this is last year, I'm at lunch duty. He goes, hey, can I talk to you? I'm like, in my head, I'm going, okay, what happened? I'm thinking something's wrong. I go, yeah, what's up? And he was like, almost like in confession mode. He goes, hey, I used AI last night to write a lesson plan. I said, oh, sweet. What'd you do? How'd it go? He goes, well, I saw this video, but I was going to bed. I didn't have time to write a lesson. I had to get to sleep, but it was perfect for tomorrow. It's like when you have those like just aha moments. So he's like, so I threw it in ChatGPT. I asked it to like create a discussion and like a little quiz and a study guide and this and that. And he's like, it took like 2 minutes. I go, okay, so what happened? He's like, I tried it today. I said, how'd it go? He's like, best lesson I've ever taught all year. I'm like, sweet, that's a great story. Now, don't do that on a regular basis, but using that experience to say, okay, I've got a partner now in my creation, in my pedagogy. Data analysis, like I mentioned before, making data-driven decisions. Data's hard to crunch sometimes, it takes time. These things can help. Like I said before, we've had great success with our ML students in terms of finding, like for example, we had a student just move here from Afghanistan, barely speaks English, and Proprio we couldn't get the phone to connect with Proprio the right way. I pulled out my phone, I opened the Chat GPT bot, and I said, I need you to translate everything into Dari for me. And there was our interpreter right there. That kid lit up when I'm hearing things in my own language instead of staring at all these people who don't speak my language. And she's having a great experience. Now, I'm not saying just because of that experience, but overall. Virtual tutors and assistants. Sometimes it just takes people longer to learn something. Having that extra partner can be a huge, huge asset. Lesson planning assistance, time management, professional development, right? There's all sorts of ways I could go on and on and on. I probably have too much. Joe, I think we're going to give Barb the 1 minute warning. Feel free to give me the 1 minute
I
warning.
have a question for you though
Yes,
regarding
please.
that. You know, you brought up the data about staff who are shying away from it.
Mhm.
I really wonder if maybe you using AI is in a praxis and training with, you know, really deliberate professional development might be the door by which they can walk through and see, oh, so this is, I'm living it and I'm learning it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I just think the fear factor is something, but if you guide them through an experience themselves using AI, they're going to be less fearful of
That is so perfectly timed. I was in a conversation with a colleague today, was sort of expressing that without really expressing that. And as I was driving home, I'm like, I had this brainstorm of like, I could create like simulations for people, right? I got my summer homework, so all good.
It'll only take 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
For sure. Sorry if I was too long, but I'm going to kick back to that.
Is there a standard, like, for the customized learning, is there a standard AI software that you're looking for that? Or, because I saw a video on that, I don't know, a couple months ago that I talked to Roger about, where it was like an elementary student, and I don't remember what they were learning, but it adjusted to what they get completed each day and how well they did, and then the next day, it repeated the things that they didn't do well on. And
Yeah, there's, I think what everybody wants is one ring to rule them all, so to speak, right? That was Google for decades with search engines, right? It beat out the Alta Vista and the Dogpile and the Ask Jeeves. It rose to the top. That's going to happen, but we're not there yet. And so I think that's what makes it so overwhelming for people is I don't know what to go to, right? So part of our committee work, and we'll show that in a second, is to help narrow that down. Because you give too much choice, that's as stifling as saying you can only use this one thing. So there are some good ones. Magic School AI is by far one of the most popular and effective. Conmigo is increasingly, and I'm not saying that just because we've done some work with Conmigo, but as I look at what it's increasingly offering, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. It's a great question.
like those two you just mentioned, do we have to pay for those, or are those free?
For right now, and I think that's, one of the things is we're getting, everyone gets you in and then you hit some of those paywalls, and we've talked about that, and I'll go into that a little bit. But yeah, Conmigo, Khan Academy, that's coming from that. Right? But I think eventually, people are going to profit off that.
Somehow.
Yeah. So our AI committee, this is just, we split it up into 3 different groups. So we had our policy group, and you guys have seen these policies, so I'm not going to click on those, but just want to make sure that, I think it was important that we talk to our staff, and, we're going to talk to our staff at the district school improvement team this Thursday, and then Scott will be putting out communication to our whole district staff, reminding them about 4229. 4229 is more the responsibility of the educator, of the adult, making sure that we're using AI, with COPA compliance, FERPA compliance, things like that. We reminded staff yesterday at the staff meeting at the high school, just remembering, don't put identifiably student information into something. We've heard some horror stories out there of people putting IEPs into AI pieces, and it's whoa, no, that's not okay, right? And so we're just reminding everybody of that policy, because while they're exploring and seeing things, or they see things online or other things, like the intent is always positive to, this is going to be a great thing, but we got to make sure that we are staying within our bounds, so we're not jeopardizing student information or anything like that,
Is there
right?
any way to silo some, like I'm thinking like MTSS eval? Is there any way that, I found the MTSS data really helpful as a teacher in terms of pinpointing what I needed to focus on with my students. I would imagine AI could take that data and even refine it further, but you have that issue that you're talking about in terms of.
Yeah, and I think that what will end up happening is, I think there will be someone that comes out with something, whether it's integrated in, right? Mike talked about Formative, for example. Formative is a program that we are using for online assessment, and there is some security and some features that are within there that is making sure that student information is safe. But a lot of the open resources that you're just getting, you wouldn't want to just throw here's Sally's, needs for an IEP, throw that into ChatGPT with all of, your student number, your UIC number, like that. That's dangerous. So teaching people where the appropriate levels are for that.
And that's why I would think, to your point about the one rule, one ring rules at all, I don't think we'll get there, because I look at it from an HR perspective, right? You have ATSs, you have CRMs, you have all these different, and everyone wants to make that one program, but there are all these other individual programs.
We don't even have it with education right now.
Yeah, exactly. But I hope they do focus on that, so you can get, you can start using it for, those types of things. So it's not so open source, and that data is just not out there and available for everybody or to the highest bidder at the end of the day. And that's what the fear is right now, right?
And I think if you're able to leave names or identifying info, like, you can get somewhere with it, right? Like,
It's a great starting point, right? Yeah.
So to your IEP example, friend of mine, different district, had a student diagnosed with something he had never heard of, but had to write a 504 plan for it. Had no clue. So didn't use student's name, just wrote hypothetically, a student has been diagnosed with this, you have to write a 504 plan. What are some accommodations? And it gave him 24 different, that would have taken weeks of research to find out. He had it in moments. And he's like, okay. So he was able to present that to the family, and they found the best plan to help support that student.
And Walt's been instrumental in always being able to vet those things to make sure we're staying in compliance with us. So, and then the other one is the policy 520801 is just, that gives the guardrails for how it can be used by students, and letting the teachers make sure that those decision making of when to use it, how to use it, and why to use it. So we have those in place. So that was good just from a policy standpoint. So that way we make sure that we have policies, so we have those guardrails of use. And then the next group created this, which again, there's so much out there. We need to have things that we just consolidated down of what are we gonna be able to support and suggest that our staff uses. And this is all based on the ISD's recommendation for safe use. So if it's white, it's ready to use. If it's in red, there's with caution, and everything. Mike helped make this out with Chris Grunhout and Jason O'Callahan, but it lays out like why you would want to use one of these tools, but also who it's for. You have down here, these are all staff resources, and then there's things broken out by grade band, both with caution and without caution. And down here under this is where the KISD link is, and they've done some good work over there at the ISD. And again, this is all things that you guys can look at, but it goes into like why something, it goes into like, is this appropriate for this group of people, this group of people, this group of people, and why, and it lays it all out. And we're basing our approved resources off of the ISD's work with this. So we've put this together. We've put this together with our staff, so that way they can at least get started on what they know is important. As you can imagine, some of the resources that they liked were not on there when we presented this yesterday, but that's okay. And we've had to have conversations, and that's allowed us to be able to ask questions of why they're using it, how they're using it, have conversations of maybe that's not the best tool for that, and here's why. And again, with the best of intentions, they're using them, but there's maybe better things or safer things that we can use for that. And then going back here, if there is something that is not on that approved list, then we had a group create, again, similar to what we do with other curricular resources or technology resources. We have a request form for if someone would like to use a different an AI source, or we talked about paywalls, right? Like some of those websites or apps are going to start either charging for premium features or with they're going to start charging for that. We said from a district perspective, we will support all of the ones that are on that list until they go to a paywall or for pay to for premiums, because then we need to vet that with Walt and with the committee to see if we're going to adopt that. So there's a process where that will go through, much like anything you guys have seen come through, from a new class, a curriculum, a resource, and things like that. So we wanted to model that process as well. So, and what's next? We're just looking at, again, presenting a policy to our staff, our parents, students, getting into that AI hubs and that selection process, training with everybody, with all three stakeholders, and then finding ways to integrate and use AI as all the ways we talked about tonight. So it's been fun work. It's been good. I'm pretty confident with where we're at, but we know we have some more work to do. So, any other questions?
I've been waiting.
I know. I'm excited.
You keep looking at me. So when I think of AI, and I'm going to age myself, and I always love to age myself because that's who I am, I think of this as like the Texas Instruments Scientific Calculator when it first came out. And most people could use the regular function, but if you wanted to get into cosine and everything else, you had to make sure you were hitting proper function buttons, which is what I see with AI, right? And I'm in the twilight of my career, but I do use AI occasionally. And from my perspective, I'm torn, which I think a lot of educators are, because am I going to use it to learn, or am I going to use it as a crutch? And you want to be careful of that, right? So how is that tool done? The thing that I don't know, that Mike, you've done all the research, are there any registered trademark issues with using these engines? Because you don't know everything that's been put into them. And how do we know that something is not copywritten that's inside of these engines? I mean, has anybody explored that? Is that something somebody thinks about? We don't need the audience.
Yeah.
Yes, to some extent. The work of Ethan Mollick, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's probably the preeminent researcher on it right now. There is that concern, like, okay, so let's say I wrote a book, right? And that book, AI is trained on my book. Now it has my book to spin out and use, and that was my creative property. So there is some of those concerns. I have not seen, in my research for this school year, this committee, I haven't seen anything that gets that granular with, copyright issues.
Okay.
That's a great question. Let's. I think that's a great question to bring up.
And I do love, and it was near the bottom of probably the 5th or 6th slide in, of what to learn versus how to learn and what to do with the learning. Because I think that's your North Star, from that perspective. One other thing, you guys have mentioned staff PD opportunities, but is there any outside, you've created your charts and what's allowed and, stay within these guide rails, right? And again, this is a very new, it's growing fast, right? Is there any outside rating summary that you can also provide to staff that helps them compare and a very quick review. So it's like, it makes me think of Consumer Reports. Is there a simple way to review an engine to make it easy? And I don't know if it's out there. I haven't looked.
I think that ISD sheet has been the most comprehensive thing that we have seen. I mean, I will commend the ISD on that work. They've done a fantastic job, because I think that was one of the things that we were asking a lot, and I think that everyone says, you hear ChatGPT or Gemini, and, I remember I had to ask, well, what was Gemini? And it's Google's, piece. So I think that putting things out there, I'm sure that it might exist. Again, I don't know if it does, but I think that ISD piece, for our sake, has been helpful to say, these are things that are useful or are safe, that check all the boxes from all the things we need to consider. But as you mentioned, right, I mean, there's new AI platforms coming out every single day, and I think that we've tried to choose some that we have found success with, that whether they're from different statewide conferences, national conferences, whether it's ISTE or McCall or the states, the MASSP is putting out, like I said, conferences and things like that, talking to those, of trying to say, like, what are the ones that people are using right now and what they're using them for, and then let's get into those, and then, I'm sure there's going to be something that's going to vet these at some point
And
from a
then
useful.
one final thought or question. Where's the curriculum for AI in this whole process?
Yeah, and I think that that's where
For students,
yep.
right?
I think that that's where it gets really interesting, right? I think where Mike said we were on the early adopting stage of that. We need to figure out what that looks like and get into that. But then I think that's where industry and career can really help us guide. What does this look like? What are those competencies? What are those things that students need to be able to do with that? And as Roger and I heard at the career prep last Friday, I'm really interested in hearing what that can do into our classrooms, and invite that industry and businesses into our classrooms to be able to say, like, here's a common day problem that my company's facing or our industry is facing, and be able to say, okay, how could you guys solve that? And that's where I think that next level of learning becomes, in terms of how can we solve this, or, hey, using this AI or using this is what we need to see. Because we've looked at outcomes from state standards, and we have Michigan career readiness standards and things like that. I don't think we have anything right now that's saying, here's what skills and usages of AIs that I'm aware of that we've seen that comes out of there. But I think that that's going to be something that would be very beneficial. But first, we need to understand it, we need to get into it, and we need to be able to allow our students to learn it. Because it's like, I'll tell you how many kids don't know how to do simple things with the Google tools in, whether it's presentations, spreadsheets, things like that. But it's just because we haven't been intentional of teaching that, but that technology's been there for a while. So we really want to look at this as an opportunity to teach it and use it well, not just generate quick answers as a crutch for students or our staff in that. How can we do it?
Cool. Nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. I just wanted to echo that. I heard a person say, figure out what you want to do, then find the platform to do it. Right now, it's all shiny and new. Look at this cool platform. That's really secondary. It's what do you want to do, and what platform will do the task you want it to achieve. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
I think once you start introducing it into the classroom, right? I mean, you're going to find so many, ways to use it that you didn't even think about right now. I mean, that's just with any technology, right? You introduce it, and all of a sudden, boom, it blossoms in a way that you had no idea that it would. And I think that's the hard part about developing the curriculum around it, right? Because we think we might know, but we don't know, right? Because it is so new, and it'll be interesting. I love the idea of the efficiency. I mean, where I've found so much use in AI is when you give it information and say, create something out of this, right? That's where I found the most success with it. When I try to ask it to do things from scratch, you get some troubles, right? I mean, it's just a simple one, and sometimes the fact-based searches within AI are challenging, right? Stupid one. Got working on Pete's graduation, party, right? Say, what are Kenyan's school colors, right? What is Gemini? What does Gemini tell me? Purple and gold. And I'm like, purple and gold? I've never seen gold down there on that campus. But that's what AI told me, right? Now maybe somewhere back in the 1800s, It was purple and gold, right? But that's not what it is anymore or recognized anymore, right? So I do worry about a little bit about the fact base, that when we start using it to garner facts. But, I do love the fact that it adds so much efficiencies. And my hope is that it does allow the kids and so forth to really take data, understand it quickly, but then to get to the why, right? Because that's where your learning really comes. Yeah, crunching the numbers and putting everything together is great, but that takes time. But if you can get it done like that, then you can really get into the why behind, why things are happening.
And that's one of our teachers talked about that in terms of what's going to be one of those skills that I think, to your point, Bob, is teaching students and adults what prompts to ask.
Yeah.
And that prompt writing becomes a skill in itself to be able to get the outcomes that you want out of that, because you're right, if you just throw anything in there, you're going to get a variety of things. And then, I for some of our hesitant staff members, I said, remember when we used to go to the online Mel research labs and things like that and look at all those, right? We didn't just take everything. We taught our students to look at sources, right? That's still a skill that we need to be able. We can't take everything for fact without just doing that. So like some of those skills that we've been teaching students for years apply to this, because you don't want students just to get an answer and just say, well, this is the gospel on this right now. No, it's not. We need to vet that. We need to fact check it. We need to be able to look at it, and you need to, compare it to other resources to see what it's saying, to get those alternative perspectives. So
I think the MASB that term that they use is called criterion for credibility.
Okay.
And I'd encourage all of us as members there is a course that's offered right now online. You can take it online. You have to register for it. And it's specifically, Amy, what did you say to me tonight? Did you take a course through the MASB? No. Anyway, I would encourage you to take that. That's very helpful. And I think, Bob, it will answer some of the things that you brought up. But that's, I think, the term that they use, criterion for credibility.
Nice.
I think that does that nicely.
And there is a state grant, you can apply for reimbursement for any of those MASB courses.
Yes, right.
I mentioned it to you last night, but what our work is using it for is taking notes from meetings.
Yeah.
But the sticky point for that is you have to record the meeting, and then it crunches, and so we have to get IT approval, and everybody that's in the meeting has to approve to be recorded before they can be recorded, and then.
And you want to be careful what you're talking about, because if it is proprietary knowledge, right? I mean, that's open, and that's the scary stuff. And yeah, that's got to be part of the training so much with this, because it's open.
Yeah.
I will say, I think that part of what we're already seeing is, I remember when Cyprian first started taking his medical test for certification, and they would start changing according to whether he was getting questions right, and they would get harder. And that's happening with our SATs, our PSATs. This stuff's already happening. But one of the things that I think you guys have this awesome committee from superintendent down to the teachers, you need to get some kids on that committee.
Yep.
I mean, because you talked about, okay, well, sometimes we're worried about the creativity use of it. Kids are going to be so creative. You're going to be like, okay, slow down on the creativity. But I think that would be, I mean, I look at, I used to think Arthur was just a genius. I'm like, he just knows how to use this stuff. He knows where to look. He knows which questions to ask, to put into, and like you said, it is interesting. You'll have super, super smart kids. I feel like Lewis is really smart, but Arthur knew how to use the AI stuff way better than he does. And so that was, to me, I think that's a really important aspect of maybe that committee, finding some of your kids who are way above, you have them. You have them at Grandville, and maybe even kids who've come back. The other thing that I think is interesting is that you pointed out one of your graphs said that the kids found the subjects important, but those skill repetitive things were way low and not important. And I think that that's a really cool thing to think, because in Montessori schools, which I love, that's where my two older went, where they started at Montessori's, and I miss it all the time because it is differentiated, and that teacher was called a guide, and you said up on here, you're like, they're going to be guides. And so I think that it's really cool to see that you could take the human aspect of a teacher, specify what you're going to teach, because you can do that lesson as a group in small groups, and then they get to practice it on things that are meaningful to them, not a worksheet. And I was a teacher. I worksheeted kids to death sometimes, and then it makes it more meaningful. It makes them want to learn. So I love those. I like those concepts a lot. That's very cool. And I do agree that there are some problems still we got to work out, but I think that as far as like being a Montessori fan, it opens up a world of possibilities for differentiating, for not making us factory setting educators, right? We know it doesn't fit every kid. So, yeah, good job, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
You know, I'm the security person, safety security, so I'm really nervous about things that we don't know about yet with us popping up. So that scares me to death, with our kids involved in that, not knowing what's out there, what they're gonna get their hands into. No, just thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, those deep fakes and some of those things are real, right?
Yeah, right.
And you're seeing those, so, you know, we've talked about that and things like that, and, you know, I think that's gonna be something that.
I think the big thing is, they're already using it way more than we even know, and they know way more than we know in a lot of ways, so it is tapping in, and I know Adam and I, with our student advisory, talked about this topic, but, you know, we have kids that are doing amazing things and can learn from that. I think the big thing for us is being able to have systems in place and being able to not only teach kids who maybe don't know, you know, a curriculum for AI, for the kids that aren't there, but also that ethical use, you know, appropriate use of it and what you can use it for.
And identifying those
and
things
identifying
there.
those things, being very
Giving our
clear
kids
about
that
it, yeah. So I think that's a
That'd be
big
helpful,
part of it,
for
you're right.
So that's where we're at.
Awesome.
Good job.
Good job,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
All right, thank you, guys.
Being on top of this. All right, any other items for discussion? No public comment, so the next regular meeting of the Grandville Board of Education will be Monday, May 19th, 2025 at 7 PM at the Administration Building. We are adjourned.